great and
An honor to have you with us, and for the benefit of all of you who are joining us, Ms. Dr. Kamran needs no introduction. She's been a legend of this industry, if I may say so. And it's an honor. In fact, in the due course, ma'am, we would love to keep coming back to you for your inputs on the sessions which we are hosting. So I will request you that you be around with us through and through.
definitely, Gaurav. It's an honor for me. It's
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, we have Dr. Kamran. I also see my dear friend John joining in. John, good to have you.
Hello. Yeah, good to be here.
Hope things are better.
Yeah, I'm still waiting to be whisked away from my quarantine, but so far they haven't turned up, so I'm good to go.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Oh, hope for the best, and so that you possibly be around with us, but that will happen, right? You will still be quarantined today by the end of the day, possibly. Is that the thing? Yeah.
Yes, they'll turn up sometime this afternoon, but I've asked them for as late as possible.
Thank you very much. Still joining in. That's the spirit. Thank you very much, John. I also see my dear friend Robert, who is not just a friend, who has helped me put this together. Robert.
Hello, good morning. Good luck to everybody. I hope you all enjoy everything.
Good, fantastic. John is joining us from Singapore, and Robert is in Turkey these days, if I'm right.
Yes, that's right.
I also have Tilokji. Your video is not working. I also have my dear friend Abhishek. But I will request, as I have been requesting all, please come on the video so that we can interact far more better. Yeah. We will start this at sharp 11 o'clock, as I mentioned earlier. Abhishek, you can mute yourself, please. Yeah.
Good morning, Gaurav.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Everybody is well in this pandemic and doing great.
Everyone is fine, yes. And I will request if you can just add a line of your introduction, that will help us connect better with each other. That's where Abhishek is joining us from the east of the country, which is from West Bengal, place called Kharagpur.
I am.
Yeah, please go ahead.
As Gaurav said, I'm Abhishek Yadav. I am the chairman of Griffins International School. We are recently opened about 4 years back. We have about 1,500 kids, CBC affiliated. In pandemic, of course, we are running online and hoping things get back to normal. That is the way it is. And that's it. Looking forward to a good day of some wonderful interactions, learnings, and see where this education takes a turn. Because a lot of times we have been saying, what is post-COVID? How is it going to impact? So a lot of changes have come, but let's learn from others. I think this looks like an exciting day. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek. Welcome once again. As I mentioned, we'll be very glad to hear from. So I've heard from Robert, I've heard from John. Anitji, you're also there. You'll have to unmute and give us a brief introduction to everyone. In fact.
Good morning, Gaurav, and everyone who is participating right now. And believe me, it's a great initiative. And this situation, I think learning has become fast-paced. And to tell you about myself, I'm heading one of the biggest schools in Punjab. And teaching was always my passion. I'm a computer science engineering graduate, but I joined this profession by choice. So it was a love marriage to this profession. And I enjoy my vocation each day. And we follow CBSE and CIE curriculum. And we have got 4,000 plus students in our school. And where we personally believe that each day should be day of learning. And the parents should get value for money. Because I consider that we all are professionals. Though the moment I say professionals, quite a lot of people will start raising their eyebrows that teaching has to be more of a vocation than a profession. But I personally feel that this acceptance has to come, that it's a kind of a service which we are providing, and we need to be very much upfront and honest in that, and value of money should be provided to each parent. And this is the reason, especially in Asian countries, we are losing that respect and recognition because we take things for granted. I think we need to be more open. We need to understand what students want. It's more about learning. And I personally emphasize on that. And I personally believe that setting up the vision of life, what exactly the child wants to do, that's more important. If we are able to help every child to recognize what all possibilities they are blessed with, so that they could actually understand their purpose of life. And according to me, this is what education is, to help the child to recognize what is their purpose of life. It is not about a particular stream, subject, or career. It's to understand their passion, recognize their passion, and to move forward. And I must appreciate Gaurav is doing a wonderful job of collecting everyone throughout the globe so that the learning can happen. Thank you, Gaurav, and all the best. Looking forward for great learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are at sharp 11 o'clock. So let's kickstart this. And I will also keep outlining that this will be a very, very conversational format. Please understand this. We will not have very tight-fisted introductions, I would say, or very close-jacketed conversation. We will like to have this in a very, very conversational format. And having said this, there's no other way we can start this. Let's pay our respect to a lot of our loved ones, if I may say, or people we would have known who have lost the battle during this COVID times. I will request a moment of silence for everyone who lost their loved ones in these difficult times as we live in. 1 minute of silence, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. As I said, that we all more or less somewhere or the other have been impacted by COVID. That's now more of a reality we all are catching up with, if I may say. Past 3 months personally and in fact professionally as well, I really was during IPN while we were interacting with a lot of leaders across at least India to begin with. These are difficult times. We all know this, but having said this, we have to still keep our chin up and keep moving ahead. Now, having said this, we have very, very extensive 2 days ahead, dear leaders. We've really curated this by giving a very due thought as to how every dialogue or every conversation which we do really adds to your repository of, if I may say, information and further translating into knowledge. Now, having said this, I will begin by outlining why we chose the very core theme of IPN Voyage this year, which is the changing world. Now, I'm sure that there can be way too many changes which we can outline, but I would certainly say that the way we live ourselves now or we conduct ourselves have changed dramatically. The way we hold our classes, the way we travel from one place to another has taken a sea change in the past 18 odd months. And if I have to encapsulate those changes into 3 broad E's, which I was in fact trying to make this as relevant as possible, I thought that these 3 E's will sum this up, sum up this change in the beautiful fashion, which is economical change the world is witnessing, environmental change the world has seen. Obviously, we are in fact, now valuing environment first time ever, more than ever, if I may say so. And last but not the least, the third E for me is education. And if we may possibly add one more E, which, as I said, I was trying to keep it out from my overall 3E basket, is the emotional well-being of an individual, which has really taken a toll. So these 3 E's to me, and an additional 4-1 is usually where we have centered all our discussions around in the next 2 days, which is the next, I would say, 5 hours or so today, and similar 5 hours today. Tomorrow will be the outline under which we will be discussing these elements. Obviously, we are not qualified to do economical discussion, economy related. Neither do we possibly add much value to environmental, but certainly today, the galaxy of leaders which we have from across geographies. In fact, I will share with you the fact we have almost 25 nationalities leaders who have registered for IPN Voyage. During the course of the 2 days, we will, in fact, we will be seeing them joining in one point or the other. So as I was saying, that we will keep this number one conversational. We will stick to our timeline. And more than that, not the only speakers which who've been designated to be our esteemed speakers, we will, through our open houses, keep the discussion actually as open as possible, which is we will involve you all in sharing your perspective as well. Purely because the format demands that you cannot really include everyone on the panel some way or the other. Hence, I usually say this, that for us, every one of you is an extended speaker who is joining the conversation. Just to quickly outline, we have kept you all muted. However, the power of unmuting is completely with you. Whenever you feel deemed fit, you have to join in the conversation. Please give us a virtual show of hand. We'll help you either unmute or we'll call out your name so that you can join the conversation or add a perspective to it. To begin with, I will request firstly, all of you to join us on video. It looks very, very awkward to speak a window which is either bot driven or possibly has just your name. Okay, so we still have, as I meant, 5 minutes more to go, and we will, in fact, we have duly shared with you the agenda for the day as well. However, I'll run you through what do we have for the next first half, which is till our lunch, and then post lunch we'll have a conversation till 5 in the evening Indian Standard Time. We will try to close it by 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Right, so we, in fact, as I was mentioning, that the core theme is about the changing world, encapsulated into the changes which the world has seen. However, we are discussing the changes which the school education has been witnessing, in fact. And I can assure you, usually I do not try too hard to say this, but whenever we try to do anything on IPN, our idea is to have quality deliberations. Our idea has to have open discussion. An idea has to have multiple perspectives coming to us from multiple parts of the world. Last year, when we did IPN Voyage, which was again our initiative to jump out of not just the Indian subcontinent, but go out to geographies like Europe, Asia Pac. In fact, this time we have registration even from the United States of America, for that matter, who are joining us for this conversation. If I have to quickly outline today's highlight of conversation, we will be beginning with Mr. Raghav Podar. Mr. Raghav Podar will be our keynote address for today's first day, followed by a panel on future of learning and future of assessment, an important panel which, as I said, will really, I would not just request all of you to give your or have your perspective ready with that, because we believe that our speakers will just be driving that conversation. We would love to have more perspective from across the board, if I may say. Then we will have Honorable Dr. Madhav Dev Saraswat, the principal of the Scindia School, a prestigious boarding school in the country, with his special address to all of us. As I mentioned, then we have one more panel, which is on NEP 2020, which is for the benefit of all our foreign delegates, our leaders. India brought in the national education policy last year, our country, and we will be having that panel on the subject matter, NEP implementation, do's and don'ts around it. And the last but not the least, for today's conversation, we will have a valedictory address with Mr. Roy Anderson, a very, very distinguished educator from UK, who will be talking to us on the impact of AI in education, and his work has a very, very demonstrated sort of implications, which we would love to hear for that matter. I will quickly check on a few things, which is, I'm sure by now, I can see now, I welcome, in fact, Mr. Raghav. Mr. Raghav is already with us. Good morning, Raghav. Good to have you with us.
Good morning, Gaurav. Thank you. Pleasure.
And as I mentioned, though we are 3 minutes away from our official start. However, I will quickly take this opportunity of welcoming Raghav, Mr. Raghav Podar, who's the chairman of Podar Education in India, a very, very distinguished school leader who has been leading, in fact, I would say, the baton of school education for our country at the global landscape. Been a huge fan of his work, the way they have been leading this fabulous organization, 130 plus school in the country. And more than that, as I said, they are change agents to a lot of new pedagogical changes in our country to begin with. So I have thrown out a very interesting topic to Mr. Raghav, and I personally believe he'll be surely doing a lot of justice with this, because whatever I have heard from him, I thought that he'll be the best man to do this for me, for that matter. And having said this, the topic which we have, in fact, Mr. Raghav will be deliberating on is building schools ready to adapt and change and not just last. I'm sure all of us heard this story about this bridge, Chutuleka. I think I usually pronounce it horribly wrong, but then I presume if that's right, Honduras River, and then this entire story became really, really viral in the last 1 year. And I thought that statement which I really brought in from that story was build to adapt and build not to last. So I once again welcome Mr. Raghav, who will be our keynote address for the day one, or in fact of first day of IPN Voyage 2.0. Everyone who has joined in, my sincere thank you to all of you for joining us and taking out time for this. And I can truly assure you this, that next 10 hours, which is both days put together, will be worth your time. Over to you, Raghav.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gaurav. Always a pleasure to be here at the IPN Networks conferences, because I've told you this before, and I'm telling this to you again, that your audience is always so engaged, so passionate, and wants to make a difference. And that's why I love being at all the IPN events. You know, I attend a lot of conferences and speak at a lot of conferences, but the thing with IPN is people are there to make a difference, and a difference in the lives of the children who are entrusted to them. And that is what our true role as educators is. Thank you, Gaurav, for having me here as a keynote. It's my pleasure. I hope I can set the tone for the rest of the day. I know you have a lot of sessions planned after mine as well. And I'm very refreshed, honestly, to when I got the topic from Gaurav. So he mentioned building schools ready to adapt and change and not just to last. And I'm so happy that it's not just another topic which is talking about hybrid and new normal and virtual learning. You know, this one topic, it's an important topic, but it's been thrashed to death across conferences across the globe over the last 15 months. So I'm so happy to be addressing you on something else than the new normal, on the new hybrid and the new virtual learning that's going to arise. Now, the topic is building schools ready to adapt and change and not just to last. The irony of the topic given to me is that building schools ready to adapt and change and not just to last is that it is only the schools that are ready to adapt and change that actually last. So if schools that get stuck to the traditional or archaic ways of teaching and aren't able to adapt and change, they either become dinosaurs or they become extinct. Or much before that, they will wither away and perish. So it's symbiotic. If you're a school that can truly stay nimble, agile, adaptable, flexible, resilient, you put yourself in that position to last. But what is the one most important thing a school leader needs to build in their school to have these attributes? I'm not going to give you the answer yet. I'll give it to you in some time. But first, let's address the elephant in the change room. Now, what is this change room? First, the fundamental question lies in why change? I'm speaking about building schools ready to adapt and change. Why change? What is the need for change? If all is going well now, then why should you need to change? And you hear parents say this sometimes, or even educators sometimes say it. I studied like that and I turned out just fine. So why should my child have to get these new systems? Even if my child studies in the same ways of teaching, learning that I grew up in, the child will turn out just fine. See how I'm doing good. Everyone I know is doing good. Yes, but you grew up in a very different time with different circumstances and requirements. So if you continuously stick to your comfort zone, you will stagnate and never progress. The world is moving every day around you and changing at a fast pace, much faster than it ever has. If you can't keep up with the change, you, my friend, will get left behind. We are preparing children for jobs that don't exist yet. They're going to be solving problems that we don't know are problems yet by using technologies that haven't even been invented yet. So we're preparing our children for lives 20, 30, 40 years from now, when honestly, we don't have a clue what the next 4, 5, 6 years are going to look like. So the uncertainty is so fascinating. It's extraordinary. Now, many of you are award-winning educationists, and IPN has awarded you or maybe some other conference or somewhere else you've been awarded. To all of the people who have won an award, the first thing I always say is that along with the recognition and pride, you also have an added responsibility to continue setting the pace, to continue improving, and continue setting the bar of excellence even higher. Everyone around you is looking to progress and improve. If you stagnate, even if you're the leader, someone more efficient and more progressive will easily dethrone you. He'll come and overtake you. The ones who can lead the change are the ones who are most likely to succeed. If you keep doing what you've done until now, you'll only reach where you've reached until now. So if you want to reach higher, if you want to achieve better results, you have to change something from what you're doing currently. And you have to introspect. You have to honestly ask yourself one question. Are you really willing to change what you're doing? If the answer is yes, then you're on the right path. If the answer is honestly no, then don't sit and complain that you're not achieving your targets and goals. Companies and schools that struggle to adapt to changing conditions, the changing environment, are held back by almost entirely one thing: their unwillingness to change. I'll give you another industry, not schools and business. Let's talk about the taxi industry around the world. So you had cabs. Maybe if you're in Bombay, you had the Kali Pili cabs, the black and yellow cabs. And how would you hail down a cab? You would do that and ask the person the taxi driver to stop. And then you'd say, boss, Bandra jayega. And then he would probably ignore you and just drive past. Very poor customer service. Even if you're sitting in the taxi, rickety old taxi, there's no customer service, there's no experience. And then came the disruption of Ola, Uber, etc., Grab in the Southeast Asia. So what happened? There was a massive disruption by a tech company in an industry that had no technology. Now, on the education front, there are already some edtech companies who have disrupted the education space, at least in the virtual front. My clarion call to all of the educators here: if schools don't continue to lead the change, set the bar of excellence higher and higher, some bigger shark will come and eat you. So you have to keep pace with the changing times. Now, let's take a trip down memory lane. What did schools look like in our grandparents' time? And what was a school? The school was a place that our grandparents went to get information and knowledge. It was a time of relative information deficit. Then in our parents' generation, if you wanted to learn or gain knowledge, yes, you still went to school, but you could also go to a library. Wow, it was a full room just full of books. But the information only lived in the teachers' heads. And the information storage devices our parents had and our teachers had, besides books, of course, was their own brain. No USB sticks, no emails, no cloud servers. Information was transported only through our brains from one place to the next. Now, our generation, when we were growing up, we had, relatively at least speaking, an information surplus. We had encyclopedias at our house. You all remember those Britannica encyclopedias or the World Book and all these other beautiful encyclopedias? We were considered spoiled. You didn't even have to get out of the room to get all this information. All on your bedroom, on your bed, you could be sitting and doing all this. And then came CD-ROMs and floppy disks. Now, how many of y'all out here remember floppy disks? I know there are some who are quite young here and may not. Well, at least our students, you ask any of your students, children, do you know what a CD-ROM is? Some of them will probably know what a CD-ROM is. You ask them what a floppy disk is, 90% I think will not have a clue. And if you remember, they used to have these disks, which were the hard ones and smaller ones. Before that were the really soft and bigger ones. And I think they had all of 128 bytes on the entire disk. Think about 128 bytes today. We don't talk in anything less than MB and GB. So today's kids, they have this information superhighway called the internet. They have this massive information surplus, unlimited info at our fingertips. Today's children would be considered comparatively spoiled with the riches of information and access they have at their fingertips. And by the time today's children grow up, they will be auto-prompted with artificial intelligence and other technologies with the information that they'll need to complete their next tasks. So what is truly important for us as educators then? In earlier decades, it was the process of information delivery that was the critical part. Now, information is available everywhere. So the role of educators has totally changed. And you've heard this, I'm sure, about Sage on the stage to guide on the side. But I'd like to put it as gatekeeper of knowledge, security guard of knowledge, to a facilitator and mentor of learning. All the role of an educator is to spark that imagination, inquiry, curiosity inside a child's brain and let learning take place organically. So on this topic of building schools, not just to last, now I can speak with some certainty and experience as Podar has one of the richest legacies, longest legacies of any educational group in India. Many might not know this, but the first Podar school was started way back in 1927 in Santa Cruz. For those of you who are thinking, no, I am not that old. I did not start it. I was not born in 1927. It was started by my great-great-grandfather, Seth Anandilal Podar. My grandfather, in fact, used to tell me stories of, Santa Cruz. For those of you who are familiar with Bombay and Santa Cruz, it's a hustling, bustling concrete jungle right now. Way back in 1927, my grandfather told me that Santa Cruz was essentially a jungle and you had things like leopards and all roaming around. So you can imagine how things have changed. My point is, so I was saying that in 1927, the school started by my great-great-grandfather, founder trustee, Seth Anandilal Podar, along with Sri Jamnalal Bajaj, Madan Mohan Malviya, and president of the trust, Mahatma Gandhi. But what matters is not only the rich legacy or the number of years we've been an education group, but what we can do with it today and what we build for tomorrow. The rich heritage legacy can only take you thus so far, but how you consistently upgrade, upskill, and be one step ahead is what truly determines where you take your institution. Now, the next question is, how do you build such an institution? Is it just about finding, a really good piece of land and then a good location it should have in the center of the city, and then get a really fancy avant-garde construction done from some really hi-fi architect with acoustic ceilings, play of natural light and learning spaces? Or is it about being able to communicate your achievements really well through your media and social media channels? Now, one needs to focus the light, zoom in the light further on, you have to build conducive learning environments. Now, let me take a step back. What is a learning environment? What is a learning environment? Is it 4 walls and a whiteboard? Is it a table, 4 chairs, few beanbags, and an encyclopedia? Or is it a field full of grass, bathed in beautiful sunlight? Yes, it's all of that. But beyond that, a learning environment is basically, fundamentally a place where learners form their states of mind, ideas, thoughts, experiences, and attitudes that they're going to carry through their life. The experiences you leave your learners with is what's going to go on to determine their attitudes to and in life. So what experiences are your schools going to give them that can truly equip the young stars to shine at their brightest and carry through life? Are these self-fulfilling, self-secure experiences where in the process of reaching their learning outcomes, the child builds self-confidence, self-esteem, critical thinking, and other essential life skills? Or are schools just cookie cutting children into molds of preconceived notions of what was traditionally considered the good Indian child? Now, there's a big number of schools still following the latter, but it's encouraging to see positive developments in many schools that realize the real value and meaning of setting up healthy learning environments. Children don't flourish in environments that they don't like. In fact, they don't even learn in an environment meant to be put in academic pressure cookers. Now, education is not a transactional phenomenon. It isn't just about transacting curriculum. The fundamental crux on what good teaching learning is based on is the human relationship. To put it scientifically or in neuroscience, the learning center of the brain, I'm going to make this a little bit interactive to the audience. What is the learning center of the brain? What's it called? What's the biological name of the learning center of the brain? I can't see any comments, so I don't know where I'm going to get the answers. But hypothalamus, no, it's not. It's quite close to that, ma'am.
Is it cerebrum?
No, it's not cerebrum. It's not cerebrum. It's not hypothalamus. Think of
Amygdala.
Medulla.
Oh, no,
The gray
sorry.
matter. The gray matter.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Think of something in your campus. Think of a big, fat animal in your campus. I've confused everyone now.
Hippocampus.
There we go. There we go. John Ridley. I see he gets the prize. Gaurava Yadav, you have to give John a good prize for the hippocampus.
Sure.
So the hippocampus, the way I tell people to remember it is just think of a big hippo in your campus. What would happen if your school had a hippo in its campus? That is the learning center of your brain. So the hippocampus, the learning center of your brain, is located right next to the emotional center of the brain. What is the emotional center of the brain? Somebody had named it earlier. Emotional.
Amygdala.
There we go. I'm not sure who said it. I can't see who said it, but it's Gaurava's responsibility and Akanksha's responsibility to find out who said that and give them a prize as well. So yes, it's the amygdala. So the amygdala is the emotional centers of our brain. Small little part of the brain the amygdala is, but controls a lot of the brain's functioning. Now, the learning center of our brain is directly next to and connected to the emotional center of the brain. What can you understand from that? That the emotional sense and state of a person is very closely related to the learning ability. Science has repeatedly proven that the mental and emotional state of a person is the key factor to good teaching and learning processes. So it's critical that the learning environment, which may be a classroom, a laboratory, a garden, or even the stairs, is engaging the child's brain. Now, while most educationists, when thinking of building a healthy learning environment, what do they think of? As an educator, when you're thinking of building a healthy learning environment, what are the things that you keep in mind? You know, people talk about good student-teacher ratio, or there should be ergonomic furniture. The child should sit comfortably and in a good position. And the building design or ed tech. And people think of educationists think of it as the epitome of learning environments. These are not the epitome by any means. They at best might be some contributors in some sense, but it's the intangibles, those that cannot be touched or seen, but only felt, that can actually define learning environments, also known as the school's culture. In my opening, I said there's one most important thing that you have to focus on, and that is what it is, the school's culture. Now, why is the school's culture that important anyways? How does it impact the learning environment? simply because student-teacher ratios, ergonomic furniture, building design, technology are not the things that make the child's brain tick. So then how do you build that school culture? The most important, by a big margin, is through your human talent. First, have you been able to build the best team? And whether yes or no, maybe you were not able to recruit the best team, but even with the team that you have you been able to buy the team into your vision of truly making a school that is ready to adapt, to change, to be agile, flexible, adaptable, resilient? Or does this remain a big fancy vision statement that everyone sees every day? You know, they matha teko to it, and then they just go on with their regular old ways. So you have to have each member of your team bought into the plan, into the vision, into the goal, into all the stakeholders have to be bought in. It has to be within the DNA of each member and each and every team member, right from peon to principal. If you can do that, it can be infectious. It can spread through the ecosystem and the culture of your school. And there is nothing more important than having a conducive school culture. And why am I harping on about school culture? Because, my dear friends, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you can strategize all you want, but at the end of the day, strategy is just an intention. Culture is the habit, is the action. The world is not changed by your intent. It is changed by what you go out and do, day in, day out, and build those habits and culture. So you can lay out the best strategy, but if your culture isn't conducive, your strategy will be useless. So how would you define your school's culture? How would you define your own school's culture? It's everything spoken, unspoken, written, unwritten. The way you behave with your teachers, the way your child greets the didi or the security bhaiya, the way when a visitor enters your school, what vibe do they get? Are they greeted by a child? Are they greeted by someone? What is it you feel as you enter your school? Is the vibe one of strictness, disciplinarian? Or is that chatter, the sounds of children's chatter, the sounds of children's laughter? What are the energy levels like? Is it stressed, tension, fear, anxiety, nervous? Or is it one of confidence, self-belief, self-secure? Does the head of the school walk the talk themselves? Which means that they are out there in the middle of the ground, in the middle of the classrooms? Or is it just an ivory tower approach where the principal is just sitting in their AC cabin and passing on orders from the cabin? It's something that can't be touched or seen. It's something that's felt. Now, in its most fundamental sense, what is the purpose of education? In one word, the purpose of education is simply learning. That's all. Why should parents send their children to school? To maximize their inherent potential and excel at what they are best in. I often ask the audiences in my education workshops, generally school leaders like you, what do you think is the right, I'll ask you today, what do you think is the right mood for a child to be in when they're entering the lesson? What do you think is the right mood for the child to be in when entering a lesson?
A happy state.
He should have a looking forward attitude. He should be comfortable in his class.
Curiosity to learn
Wonderful.
something.
Wonderful.
Excitement and curiosity. Excitement and curiosity.
Wonderful. So the one who said curiosity first, Gaurava, I'm sorry, I'm loading you with all these unexpected prizes. But Gaurava, with his very big heart, is always obliged.
I thought I was a quiz master, but nevertheless, I had it good.
You get to decide the points. So the one who said curiosity, well done. Somebody said about looking forward to it. Yes, absolutely. They must look forward to it. The four most common answers that I get from education leaders, and I'm not talking about Indian education leaders, I'm talking about across the world. It could be in Spain, in Australia, in UK, in America. Four most typical common answers. The child should be positive, happy, child should not be hungry, child should not be sleepy. Now, while these are important criteria, even if the child is really happy, what did we decide that the purpose of education is? It's simply learning. If the child is really happy, how does that make your teaching result in better learning? Maybe he's happy because it's his birthday tomorrow and he's going to get a lot of gifts. Or maybe it's his favorite cricketer scored a century yesterday. That's why he's really happy. How does that make your teaching result in better learning? If he's not hungry, if he's not sleepy, how does that make your teaching result in better learning? The most important.
You get full attention from the child.
Exactly. So to get that most attention from the child, to have the child's brain engaged, the most important criteria is that the child's brain has to feel challenged, curious, and has to see a purpose to the lesson. Now, what is that purpose? And before that, if a child's brain is not in the state of mind when entering the lesson, you can be rest assured that your teaching is not going to result in much learning. So in other words, your role as a teacher would pretty much be useless. I mean, if the child's brain is outside in the garden thinking about the mango tree, and that's making him happy, that doesn't mean he's engaged with your lesson. So the purpose, why are we doing this? Now, the purpose of a lesson or education is not marks or a competition or who got more on the test. Now you think about it, a child who, what is the first scene that happens when you hand back your paper to the child? The teacher has corrected the paper. Most of you all have been teachers. You corrected your paper and gave it back to the child. What's the first scene that happens inside the classroom? The child will ask the other child, how much you got, how much you got. You want to know. Every child wants to know how much the other child got. Now, it's a competition. It's become, and it's an unhealthy competition. So in a video game, you think about a child who does badly in maths, let's say twice or thrice. What does the child start believing? No, maths is not for me. I'm a failure at maths. Maths and me don't get along. It's not my thing, maths. I like science or I like history, geography or whatever. Now the same child will go home that day in the evening and play a video game 15 times. He'll fail at one particular level, but he'll still try for the 16th time. Why? Have you ever heard a child ever say, no, video games are not for me. I'm a failure at video games. Video games and me don't get along. Doesn't happen. Why? Because there's a challenge, there's a purpose associated with actually achieving the next level. And that is what our role as educationists need to be, not to put a lid on the child's curiosity, which is the building block of good and healthy teaching learning. A lot of times and I know that there's an assessment system discussion that's going to happen after this, but the assessment system cannot be one that is one right answer. So anything beyond that one right answer is considered, you are dumb, you don't know. Khali, that is the one right answer. You have stopped the child's creative capacities, the child's ability to think, which is exactly what education requires. So when you're talking to a child, what are you talking to? Their hair, their face, their eyes? No, you're talking to the child's brain. You're communicating with the child's brain. So if his brain is shut off or is outside in the garden, what are you really achieving? So there was a survey done and it was found out that how many students are actually brought into the right mood for 3 different scenarios. 1, an exam or test at school. So what is the typical mood of a child before they enter an exam or test at school?
Anxiety.
What's the typical mood of a child just outside that exam hall?
Worried. He's worried.
Anxiety.
Worried.
Anxious.
Anxiety.
Peer pressure,
Stress,
anxiety,
Yes.
stress, tension,
Tension.
fear, anxiety, and along with stress,
Social distress also.
yes, social distress. And so what is that accompanying friend of stress called? It's called cortisol. It's a chemical produced by our bodies when there's too much stress. And the typical scene outside that exam hall, miss, 2 minutes, I'm just finishing my last minute revision and coming in. Now, what is that child going to learn in those last 2 minutes that he hasn't learned in the last 2 weeks or 2 months? Honestly, nothing much. But what he's done is given his prefrontal cortex, the front part, CEO of our brains. And why do I call it CEO? Because it controls your executive functioning, decision-making of your body. He's flooded the prefrontal cortex with a chemical called cortisol and reduced his ability to perform at his best. So when the survey was done, it was found that only 10 to 20% of children enter the right mood before an exam or test at school. What about a sporting activity? What do you think? What percentage of students enter the right mood before a sporting activity?
Almost 100%.
Yes. Anjali,
Yes,
Almost 100%.
100%.
100%. Right.
Absolutely.
Compulsory.
So it was about 90 to 100%. That is where the range was. 90 to 100% in the right mood consciously before a sporting activity. Why? Because sporting activities naturally release these wonderful good chemicals in all of us, like endorphins, the dose chemicals, the dose of happiness, what I call them, the dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, which makes you feel good, really good about yourself. Now, what about homework at home? What percentage of students do you think consciously enter the right mood before homework at home? And I love this that I'm addressing a group of August educationists.
20%.
20 to 30%.
20 to 30.
I'll say 40.
40. So we're ranging somewhere between 20 and 40%. Okay, what is the mood, or how is a child told to do homework? Beta, you have to do your homework. If you don't do your homework, I won't let you go out and play. If you don't play, I will complain to your teacher. I will tell your teacher, then you see what happens. Pehle to, why have you made teacher into gabbar? What is the need for scaring that child against teacher ko bata dungi? Why is teacher made to be this fear figure? First of all, it's 0 to 10%. That is all. So when a child is doing homework, what is the purpose of homework? To reinforce the concepts that was taught inside class, so that there's better brain absorption. If a child is doing homework out of your fear or out of your respect, but actually not engaged in that, what he's gaining from it is perfunctory in nature. So it's much more important to focus on how the homework is done, why it's done, and how you're going to engage the child's brain for that homework. Now, there was a survey done, not by me, by the World Economic Forum about 3-4 years ago. And they ranked countries on the basis of the amount of time parents spend with their children on average per week, helping them with their homework. Where do you think India was on that? Do you think it was high, which means that Indian parents spend a lot of time with their children doing homework?
Top of the list.
Must have been
Lower side. Lower side, sir.
must
From
have
the
been
bottom itself, from the bottom itself, sir.
Okay, some are saying quite a few are saying bottom, and I heard one say.
Mr. Podar, if I may, right now, if you do that survey, you will have the classroom also attended by parents.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Very well said. Very well said.
The top bracket.
So I'll tell you that I had done this. I was addressing an audience in Bangalore, and one of the conferences where we had about 50% were adults and were parents or educationists, and 50% of the audience was children. The most interesting thing was that the children, almost all of them said that we think our parents spend too much time with us helping them with homework. And most of the parents felt India would be right at the bottom, means parents don't spend enough time. The right answer is India ranked #1 in the world for the number of hours that parents spend with their children per week on average, helping them with their homework or schoolwork, which is at 12.0 hours per week. There are countries like Japan, which was at the lowest at about 2.6 hours per week. China and USA are somewhere in the middle at about 5.5, 6 hours per week. Now, I'm not going to say that it's good or bad. I'm just saying that the quality of that time spent with the child in their homework is far more important. Now, we care so much about, recharging our phone's batteries, but we have to focus on recharging our children's brain batteries. That's very, very important. Now, I know that I'm running out of time, so I'm going to cut a bit of my presentation. I'm going to move on to the conclusion, because I know that the rest of the speakers will also be waiting, and I understand how, as a conference, how difficult it gets to, if you have some delay in the beginning, then that just keeps on carrying forward. So I'm moving quickly on to my conclusion. What's the most favorite thing of many Indian and many Asian education systems? That holy grail that we are all made to chase. Come Jan, Feb, March, what are we all chasing as
Completing the syllabus.
Exams.
Exams and
Exams,
marks.
tests, scores.
Targets.
What was the biggest news over the last 1 month? Everyone in the country had an opinion on.
Grade 10 and grade 12
grade
exams.
10th as well as 12th standard.
There we go. There we go. Grade 12 exams and exams and exams. And education has just become about exams. My dear educationists, and y'all are in positions of influence. That's what I'm telling you. The role of a school is not merely a building that prepares a student for an exam, but for the exam called life. The life skills is what we are preparing students for, and not just that memorization and regurgitation exam that they give. So now what are tests? What are marks? What are scores? Tests are meant to be diagnostic. They're meant to be diagnose the strengths and weaknesses of the student so the teacher can adjust her lesson delivery accordingly. But tests in our country, unfortunately, have become a means to put a label on a student's forehead. So you get 95 and you get this label on your forehead, genius. And you get 75, average, 40. Oh my God, what terrible labels they put on people's heads that, oh, stupid or duffer, or these terrible, terrible terms are used. Now, what does it tell me if you got 90 and somebody else got 75? That you can probably memorize and regurgitate better. But is memorization and regurgitation truly what us children are going to need today? They already have Google on their fingertips. By the time they grow up, they're going to be auto-prompted with AI and other technologies, with the information that they require for the next task. You can memorize all you want. You can even become a mini encyclopedia, but you will still not know more than Google. So in the 21st century, the world economy will not reward you for how much you know, but for what you can do with what you know, not for the amount of knowledge that you have, but for how you apply the knowledge that you have. So in conclusion, it's thus imperative that schools focus on learning environments in terms of the culture set in the school that can truly build these life skills in their students. And not only in their students, but also in themselves. Those future-ready skills of being adaptable, flexible, agile, and resilient, so that you can build a school that is adaptable to change and as well as one that will last. Thank you very much.
Very rightly said, sir. These are all 21st century school students already blessed with technocrat. Only the need of an hour is just we need to guide them in a proper way. Lots of things within one click itself, they are having all the information.
Absolutely.
Educators as well as the facilitator, they need to provide, they need to nurture them with the proper values, and that's it.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And that change has to start from within us. If we are saying that it should be the child who should do this, if we can't do it ourselves, don't expect our children to do it.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Raghav. As I said, no better person than you to give this start. If I may say, you are our Viren Sehwag of IPN. Now I have to say that, having said this, but I think the better expression would be these days Sehwag is retired. So I'm sure, but then Sehwag was one of the definite openers for us. Having said this, what a lovely message. Anit, you have to say something, please. Anit ji, want to say something? Over to you.
Raghav, first of all, I must say it was mesmerizing listening to you. I really enjoyed every word of it. And I truly believe whatever you have stated. But see, my question to you is that how many schools in our India are actually child-centric? So are they parent-centric? Are they promoter-centric? We really need to introspect. And second thing, we all vouch that marks are not important, but happiness of most of the Indian families depend on the marks which our child is scoring. Now, why marks have become very important? Because the higher education, there is no entry to any good college or university until unless we clear any examination or marks in the grade 12 examination. Now, even in the best colleges in the country, I'm talking about IIT, BITS, Pilani, and other colleges, they also have a bar with all the brand ambassadors, all the CEOs of Wipro, Accenture, Deloitte. They would say that only skills are important, marks are not important. But once they come for an interview, even at IIT, they would very categorically say that below 8 CGPA, you are not eligible even for the interview. Even the best universities in NCR would say, if you are less than 98.9%, I'll not give you admission over there. So that is in the capital region. So with so much of pressure on the parents to go after marks. I do agree that purpose of life is important. We need to empower every child, but the whole system has to change. The industry has to change, the higher education has to change. Then only these things would be very feasible. And then my question to all the educators, have we ever advertised someone like on a big hoarding that he is the most disciplined student? He is the best student. We always come up with great academic results on all our marketing collaterals, on all our hoardings, all our USPs. So the whole mindset has to change, because I personally enjoyed this profession and it was a love marriage to this profession, I've already stated. But quite a lot of things we need to do, but the parents expect from us, but the society expects from us. So just give me a formula that how exactly we could change their mindset. Though I'm trying my level best, I do quite a lot of coffee mornings with them, I talk to them, but it's happening very, very slowly.
Thank you, Anit. And Gaurava, I don't know how much time I have to answer that because it can take quite a while, but I'll try to keep myself short and succinct. As for the question of how many schools truly are student-centric, honestly, I don't have an answer to that. I know it's a rhetorical question, but I understand that many schools are not student-centric, and that is what we need to, as educationists, try to change that. That is why I speak about these kinds of things at my education workshops and forums, because it is people like us who genuinely care about that, who understand that the system needs to change, are the ones will be able to change it, right? If it's not us who do it, who else will? So we have to make it about heuristic learning, heutagogy, which is student-led, or andragogy, self-determined learning, which is far more important. The next point, as far as it being a systemic change, a mindset change, you're absolutely right. It has to be a systematic overhaul. And there is no better time than today. This pandemic has allowed us to totally overhaul that education system, the assessment system, to truly start measuring, valuing the skills of students, the life skills that will truly matter. I understand that you say that to get into an IIT or a BITS Pilani, that what is it that marks that are going to require. But like Sundar Pichai said at IIT Kharagpur, it is not just, the purpose of schooling is not just about getting into the best college. The purpose of schooling is preparing a child for life, maximizing their inherent potentials, excelling at what they are best in, whether that is an exam in terms of an academic pressure cooker. Some children may excel at that, and good, there's no problem with that. But the children who don't, they are not failures. They are successes, and we need to, you're right, put them up on the hoarding, put them up on the billboard as true successes who have gone out and changed the world in something besides an academic pressure cooker. And it is people who have that passion, like you, like all of the people watching here, who have to take that responsibility on their shoulders. It's incumbent upon all of us as education leaders to steer this evolution of education in the right direction, which will truly benefit our 21st century students the most. Our posterity is going to look back at this time as one of those defining moments that comes once in centuries. And they'll either thank us for the direction in which we took education, or they will curse us for not rising up to the occasion when we had the opportunity.
Fantastic, fantastic. As I said,
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
People will judge us, if I may say. Raghav, thank you very much. Completely out of time. And having said this, though we will request you that whenever you get time during the course of the day, please keep chipping in so that we can involve you in the larger conversation. Thank you very much. Once again, pleasure. I quickly move on to our next agenda, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, we are already 10 minutes now, but then having said this, we'll catch up. Don't worry on the time bit. Important conversation, very important panel, if I may say, and joining me as I moderate this panel for you is Dr. Prem Maheshwari, who is this director of, in fact, Southeast Asian business for D2L. Dr. Prem, good to have you with us. I will give me a moment. I'll just quickly make you the co-host as well. However, you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Like Dr. Prem, who's be our first panelist on this panel, interesting panel, and which is on the topic, future of learning and the future of assessment. We love to hear from him the technological intervention his organization is doing. That will be the role I have assigned Dr. Prem Maheshwari on. Next, very esteemed educator from our country, from the north, Dr. Neeta Bali. Dr. Neeta Bali is the director principal at the GD Goenka World School in India. Welcome, Dr. Bali. Good to have you with us. I was trying to locate you by your name, but sadly I'm unable to do so. If you're there, please come on the video, ma'am. And if you can,
I am on the video, but erroneously mentioned as Nupur Goenka.
Nupur Goenka, yes, there's something,
Could you have that rectified? Yeah.
I'll just make you the co-host. I will change that for you as well. Dr. Bali, as I said, is with us as well. Moving on, I have Ms. Meera Mathur, who's a principal of DPSG International School in India. Welcome, Ms. Meera. Good to have you with us as well.
Thank you, Gaurav. Pleasure is mine. Always good to be involved with some project of yours. Always topical. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ms. Meera. Moving on, I have my dear friend, Mr. John Ridley, who's the Director of Learning at the Tangling Trust School in Singapore. Welcome, John. Good to have you with us, and we would love to hear your perspective. Having heard you before, I thought you will be the best fit for this panel as well.
Thanks, Gaurav. Delighted to be here.
Moving on to my final two panelists, Mr. Matej Sepak from Slovakia. He's a principal of Leaf Academy there. Matej, if you're there, welcome once again. Good to have you with us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And last but not the least, very, very dear friend, Mrs. Sita Murthy from the Silver Oaks Groups of Institutions. She is the Director of Education with the institution. So with that panel being introduced, I will quickly outline few specific things so that we make sense of everything which we brought in, which is number one, we'll take up the questions or your observations at the last. The educators, I believe we've given that power of unmuting, and that's somehow a little corrupt by nature. It corrupts us to a bad level for that matter, because I see a lot of hodgepodge going through in the last conversation. My request is, if you can give us a virtual thumbs up, and then we help you unmute and then possibly ask your question, it will help us to keep the decorum intact. But having said this, I will begin with this wonderful paper, which I very recently read when I was preparing for this panel, because as I said, I'm looking as much as an answer to the topic which we have than all of us here. But I think this paper, which I will share with you, all our participants after this conversation, says one thing, which is assessment should serve as useful information about the development of learners' capabilities, but not define, measure, evaluate, and confirm merit. I thought this was a very, very powerful line to begin the conversation. But having said this, our context is set. The dialogue is about future of assessment and learning. In the first part of my dialogue, or I would say the question, I would love to have opening remarks from each of my panelists on what, as per them, is future of learning. And I will request the chronological order which I began, barring Dr. Prem, because I will get into the Dr. Prem's dialogue on the technology front. I will request my first panelist, who I introduced after Dr. Prem, which was, I believe, Dr. Bali, to please take it over.
Thank you, Gaurav. Very pertinent question. We are talking about the future of education. Definitely, we know that after the pandemic, there is a tectonic shift. We adopted technology at a breakneck speed, if I may say so, overnight. People who suffer from technophobia simply picked up their cudgels and went into the use of technology. The entire ecosystem of education seems to have changed so much, and I think we are at a point of no return. There is absolutely no way you can go back to a chalk and talk method anymore. So there will be a new educational model even after things ease out and children are back in the classrooms. You cannot have a simple chalk and talk model. You will have a hybrid model, or you will have blended learning. And information and communication technology is here and here to stay. So using information technology for education and in education integrating it seamlessly into the traditional model. I'm not saying the traditional model will go away, but definitely, as I said, technology is here and here to stay. So using language apps, video conferencing, blended teaching, learning, virtual touring, all this is here to stay. And I think the entire landscape will change and it will be a hybrid model. That is my own conviction and good for us.
Fair. So just to outline it, we will first take all our panelists' view on future of learning, the educators, and then we will actually bring in all of you into this conversation, right? So Meeraji, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. So for the 3-year-old child who joins my school today, I'm actually preparing him for a world 17 years later. So to make this child future ready, future learning will feature student autonomy. It'll be student-led, student-centered, with a large sprinkling of technology. So like Dr. Bali said, chalk and talk days have long gone. Now the student's role is larger and learning is not out of textbooks anymore. Education actually is what remains after books are closed. So the future envisages inquiry, exploration, research, collaboration, project-based learning with a competency-based curriculum, which has to be relevant to the real world. So the future learner cannot be a receiver of knowledge and facts. He will not be told. Instead, the learner will ask, will research, will come to an outcome. So the educator will have to make a massive shift in approach. No more of telling or providing solutions. Now personalized pathways will have to be paved, and individuals' interests, aptitudes, needs, learning styles, experiences, and challenges would be paramount, because one size doesn't fit all. Each learner would have agency, would have an individual developmental continuum, and would be the owner of his learning. This student-centered and student-led journey would rest on fostering positive relationships. It has to be the development of the 3 H's of head, hand, and heart. So problem solving, critical thinking, logical reasoning, having an identity and self-image. So anytime, anywhere learning with a chance of revisiting it, that is complete agency, as I said, and ownership of the student, who is the center of it all, who is why we are here today, and who is what we are talking about today. Thank you.
True, absolutely. And I think the more we delve into it, the more we get to learn everything about new on a continual basis, in fact. And John, I would also love to hear your perspective on this. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Gaurav. So my context is based in Singapore, Director of Learning at Tanglin Trust School, which is a large international school, age range 3 to 18. And at the top of the school, we have a dual pathway. So 2/3 of the students do A-levels and a third do the IB diploma. In terms of the question, it is such a big question, the future of learning. I was thinking quite narrowly, but after Raikhav's talk earlier, I just want to start by saying I think there is going to be a shift in the value that we give to the pure academics compared to skills-based and co-curricular as well. We are definitely we value a holistic education at Tanglin, but often we're constrained by what the parents want, that entrance to university, and everything gets skewed to the academics. But I think there will be a shift. It's already shifting. And that's the big picture. In terms of shorter term, I think the pandemic has really accelerated. I agree with the previous two speakers. Definitely, there's been a massive leveling up of skills and confidence amongst the faculty. So the reluctant learners amongst the teachers have had to get up to speed really quickly, and they found that they can. Technology is easy to use these days, and that sets a massive opportunity. And I think in 3 areas in particular, and this is not long term, this is kind of now. One is, I think we're revisiting that question of whether face-to-face is always best. And certainly at Tanglin, we've always assumed that the best learning takes place. It's a social activity. We need kids in classrooms. We need to be seeing their faces, etc. But actually, there's huge benefit to some of the asynchronous learning, where students can review recorded videos, for example, over and again many times, as many as they need. They can access that work from anywhere at any time and all of that. So I think that's getting more value. Secondly is the personalization, again, to do with the technology tools. Students being able to work through it a self-paced manner, tools that are adaptive, so respond to the students to make sure that all the students are challenged appropriately. And then thirdly is assessment, and that is a really big topic. But in short, I think we've learned that any kind of program that relies on terminal written exams at the end is not a resilient program these days and set up to fail. So we've got to look at a more continuous assessment model, more blended assessment models.
Yeah, thanks, John. In fact, I will come to Dr. Prem. Dr. Prem, now, given all my previous speakers, in fact, if you look at it, and I'm really, really glad that the entire underlining base of this is now technology. And I remember March 20th, 2020, when there was no hope of COVID, or I would say technology was the biggest, if I may say, if not the only enemy that the educators had. But today it is biggest ally to them, right? That's a pleasant surprise for all of us. So I want to quickly jump in and ask you, in the past 18 months, at least, because you were at the side of implementing this technology into the institution, how have you seen, or what has been your own understanding as a technology evangelist on the future of learning, if I may say?
Well, thanks, Gaurav. And your topic says future of learning. And I think that future depends on the past way teaching and learning, modus operandi teaching and learning has been happening, and the current pandemic situation, which has led to a massive paradigm shift which has happened, and essentially due to technological disruptive innovations, courtesy the pandemic. And that has actually changed the entire way the educators, the schools, the principals, are looking at education now. And, I see a lot of changes which have already happened. And gradually in our country, though we are a little late adapters to technology, but we have seen that gradually schools and principals and school owners are now moving to that change. Everything has changed in terms of how education has been happening and will happen. So we've been promoting a learning management system, a learning management platform for all the schools and educational institutions worldwide, and that too in India. And I've seen how things have changed from the traditional way of even assessments that used to be pen and paper written assessments, which is also already prevalent in our country, have moved to digital assessments, video assessments, wide variety of quizzes, open book, open web examinations. All that innovation is happening. That is actually preparing our students for the future world tomorrow. A lot of competency-based education has come into play. As Ma'am Meera mentioned and Dr. Neeta also mentioned, what we're now talking about is individualized and personalized education scenarios, which means that using technology, and especially so when we absolutely know that students are not in these schools, and in the near foreseeable future and in the next academic year also, when we know very clearly that they're not going to be in school, that actually focuses the entire way the education is getting delivered in the form of a competency-based or individualized or personalized learning methodology. The idea is that each and every student is different. Each and every student has a different way of teaching and learning, and therefore individualized and personalized levels of education can be ensured using competency-based education model, using digital platforms, which helps you do that. Also, so far in our system, we used to have sage on this stage, typical teacher teaching in a class, going through standard, curriculums. Technology has moved the sage on this stage to guide by the side. Now, teachers are more consultative in their approach rather than just delivering lectures using technology, and platforms, digital platforms have made this a possibility. Also, immense amount of analytics are available now with these schools, as a result of which not only this helps them to fulfill the requirements of the regulators, whether it is CBSE or ICSE or government boards, or even international baccalaureates or IGCSE boards. So in terms of generating massive predictive analytics through these learning platforms have helped schools to actually have a bird's eye view on the performance of each and every student, each and every class, each and every section, how things are moving. They're also able to identify at-risk students and therefore take corrective action in time to ensure that proper teaching and learning is happening. Gradings have changed. The way recognitions and awards and certificates are given to students have changed. Parent-teacher meeting scenario has changed. Parents are now available on the portal and they're given limited access to the performance of the awards. All of this has changed, and that exactly is the future of education. Even post-pandemic, when students are back to school, I think it has to be a hybrid model. It will be a hybrid model, combination of face-to-face teaching and learning, complemented and supplemented with digital classrooms, digital learnings, digital quizzes, examinations, assessments, gradings, and everything. That's the view that I have in terms of future.
I'll quickly ask you a question, which I will require a very brief answer on that. One is to have these things in your portfolio, and one is to really adopt them. So because you are a service provider on that front, how has been the adoption level of really adopting and implementing it into the system? What is as per your opinion?
So it was really challenging when the pandemic started. Those people who started with the learning platforms had a tough time, and especially the academics, the faculties, and the school managements. So what needs to be done and what has been done from our side is change management, because there's a massive change in the learning styles, in the learning pedagogies because of this pandemic and because of digital education. So what we focused on, though we are an edtech company, education technology company, but we call ourselves as a learning and education company. And what we did was we focused on training of the faculties, key faculties and administrators at the back end. They have to change the entire learning style, the teaching style, adapted technology. So that was the focus, Gaurav. What we did was, when we implemented the solution at any school, our primary focus was to actually focus on learners, the faculties, and the administrator. We continuously gave them trainings. We continuously gave them.
So that is what exactly I wanted to, because I have seen that a lot of expectation being built around it. And then when it eventually goes to the implementation part, there are two different worlds altogether. Anyway,
Gaurav, one more thing I would like to add here is what we did was, we found, and the way we convinced teachers to adapt this technology was, we told them that, see, you waste a lot of time in various mundane activities, administrative tasks. So even after you correct the assignments, you are also tasked to grade them, when you put them in the right perspective, create those Excel sheets, publish them, talk to all those things. A lot of these mundane activities are automated using technology. So that saves on your activities in terms of giving that important time to administrative work. You can focus completely on education. That's what we train them and we do.
Thank you. Thank you very much for bringing that perspective. Matej, I want to understand, given where you are based, how are the changes or what are the new things possibly in your region? If you're there, Matej.
Absolutely. And once again, thank you. It's a pleasure and a privilege to talk to you. As a bit of context, we are an international boarding school in Central Europe, and we use the US-based AP curriculum in the final 2 years. I think, the developments in education are the same all over the world. We're looking at change from content to competency. We're looking at a greater focus on learning. I actually love the way you phrase the question here, because we're not talking about the future of education, we're talking about the future of learning. And there's a big difference between the two. A lot of us still think about ourselves as educators, not as guides to student learning. So I think that's one huge change that we're already living. Now, I would give you two keywords that are to me very important for the future of learning. One is connection, and the other is collaboration. What we've seen during the pandemic was that students who were the most engaged, the most motivated internally, were the ones who did best. The students who were not able to keep up that engagement when they were forced to work online during the quarantine times with COVID, those were the ones who struggled. So one key role for us as educators, as guides for learners, is to provide that connection, to help students understand how their learning actually matters to their lives. And if you're interested, there's actually, has long been a curriculum model that's called parallel curriculum. And it talks a lot about the importance of connections between subjects and to the actual world and the students' lives. The second area, collaboration, is also very important. The current move towards learner-centered education is critical for student success. But a lot of it is focused on individualization and on the needs of individual students. The shift to asynchronous learning is very, very helpful for a lot of reasons. But one of the things that it does is it takes away the team element of learning. The learning that comes not from the teacher providing content or the internet providing content or books providing content or individual student research providing content, but students learning from each other and learning to work together. The future of most jobs is not in the sort of solitary scientist in the lab or the solitary, leader of a country who through example and charisma moves it forward. The future of research, of public service, of business is in big teams working together and building on each other's strengths. And so as important as the move towards individualization inevitably, undoubtedly is in education, it's also important that we keep in mind the need to help students learn teamwork, learn to work together, learn to build on each other's strengths. So collaboration in the online world of tomorrow is going to be a key challenge for us as educators to crack. Thank you.
Well put, Amitesh. That's what, and actually it gives us a perspective as to what the larger part of Europe is also witnessing. So you bring that voice from that side. Thank you. Is it Sita Murthy?
Yes, Gaurav.
How are you?
Thank you very much for giving me the advantage to have the last word. We in school here usually love having the last word in any event or location. But interestingly, I don't have the last words because the panelists before me have said it all. There is no word that they have left that I have to newly use now, whether it's the keynote speaker or the panelists. Everyone articulated the future of learning so beautifully. So all I will say is that the future of learning is the learner. I want to consider the learner because that human connect is the most important thing. We may consider a lot about the environment, the ecology, the factors, the devices, the technology, everything of course will naturally come into place, just like they have been pushed into the ecology in the last 1.5 years. But I would rather consider learner as the future of learning. I want to focus on that part of it. Like how Raghav Poddar talked about the amygdala and the hippocampus. There is a great scientific evidence that the amygdala has been growing in size, okay? Which means the capacity to learn is growing in size. And what is the responsibility of we, the educators, if we can call ourselves that? Our transition from pedagogy to andragogy to heutagogy. The three terms Raghav Poddar already used, but I'd like to just simply put them like this, that all of us, we always used to think that our job is to teach pedagogy. There we looked at student-centric learning, group learning, peer learning, andragogy. But for me, the future of learning is heutagogy, putting the learner as a central actor in learning. And how do we make that happen? Only when we understand our learners, when we understand their context, when we understand their universe, and when we know how to make it relevant, engaging, challenging, and significant to each one of them. Then I think we are talking about future of learning. That's my last word.
See, that's the power of the last word. Yeah, but having said this, I wanted to quickly, because as I said, I have to do this in a bit of a hurry in the sense that I want to really get as much of input as we can get from all of you. So given now my panel has helped me establish what the future of learning would look like. If we had to redefine this from what your existing setup was happening, what are the 2 things you would like to redefine from the existing to the future of learning? If I may say, Mateus did answer that for himself, because when he said that for him, it is about connection and it's about the collaboration bit. So I would not like to have a detailed answer on this. I just want a pointed answer from you, all of you, in fact, that if we had to redefine as per your requirement, what will be that? In 2 points each. Mrs. Mathur?
Building skills and communication.
Okay, and I'm assuming that you are doing this for your school, right? That's the redefinition of implementation at your school. Fantastic. John?
For me, it's about going back to your intro where you said assessment should be about the next steps in learning, not about merit. I actually disagree with that slightly. I think there are 2 types of assessment. For me, what I'd like is to just create maybe 2 new words. One that's still about the end point, and there does have to be a sort of marking of the learning at the end of a stage, ready for the next stage. Fine, let's have a word for that. And then assessment for learning, completely different approach. I also slightly disagree with Dr. Prem when he's talking about his system that does all those spreadsheets for us. It saves us the time. I'd like to go a step further and get rid of those spreadsheets completely, because I think the vast majority of assessment is meaningless as soon as it's done, because it's a transitory glance at the students at that point in time, and then you do some teaching so they move on. So let's throw those spreadsheets away and focus on the moving on. So that's it for me.
Dr. Bali?
For me, definitely assessment, end of the road for pen and paper learning. That goes without saying. I would want it to be assessment for learning, not assessment to figure out what has been learned. And then I would rather prefer a more holistic kind of assessment, which would involve peer assessment, some kind of self-assessment, 360-degree assessment, and an assessment that will allow children to be able to explain how much they have learned through student-led conferences, which you're already doing in most IB schools. So I would prefer that. And as Sita very rightly said, for me, children are in the center. Children are the center of this universe. So let them figure out what they have learned, and let us see how well they have learned what they have learned. Each child learns differently. So let us not use this thing of the same size fits all, because every child learns differently. So it has to be relative. Assessment has to be very relative.
Okay.
What is right for one is not right for the other.
True. So I think, Mateus, because you already answered that, because I took that leaf from you. And in fact, the first part of the dialogue was about the learning, because we had 2 parts to this panel, which is one is the learning aspect. Now we go to the assessment piece of it, because I think that difficult part is assessment. And learning is, I personally feel more or less educators are now coming to terms with that it has to be far more collaborative or individualized and all that. As I said, I mean, I'm usually not very good with these jargons, if I may say, but having said that, I understand this for the first time in the history, if I may say, educators are now coming and talking this. And I can vouch for where I come from. When I was in school, which was 2 decades ago, ICSE board, small town in India, the only thing which was talked about there was how good are you in your academics. Forget about individualized learning, forget about what you do, anything in sports. The important thing was how good are you in your academics. So the good thing or the refreshing change I see, and that's the beauty of working with IPN, is that I get to see that mind shift change in a massive way, number one. And obviously it will take its own time to get it implemented. Now coming to the second part, as I said on the assessment bit, my question, which I had also shared during that in our discussion email was, in any way, assessment has changed for your institution over the period of 18 months to begin with. And I'll start from Mrs. Murthy. which is anti-clockwise this time around. Over to you.
Sure, Gaurav. I mean, it's a pleasure sharing the answer to this question of yours because how has it changed for us? I remember reading, I think a year and a half ago, something in a newspaper which said about in China many years ago, for recruitment into government services, there used to be a question, an entrance exam. And there was only one question. The question is, write what you know. Imagine the state of mind of a person who's sitting in front of that, write what you know, okay? I use that model for my last years, I mean 2020-21 academic years in school assessments. All I said was present what you know, because writing is not possible in school exams, it's not possible. So I only said the last few months, 10 to 11 months, you've learned so many things. I want you to pick up what you feel you have learned significantly. Make a presentation, make a website, make a movie, do whatever you want, or just write it and mail it to us, but present. We call it the project graduation because graduating from one class to the next. You know, that opened a magical avenue to us because when we saw, because until then teachers used to think, oh, these guys are not switching on the cameras, we don't know whether they're listening or not. But what they presented was so mind-boggling that one simple question unraveled millions of things that children have of learning. So for me, how has it changed? Assessment capable learner, you know, a learner who's enabled to understand what am I being assessed for. He's just being assessed for, he or she, for what he knows or she knows, okay? That democracy in assessment has changed completely for us. That, you know, that landscape changed. That's what I'd like to say here.
Wonderful. As I said, see, now the moment you go anti-clockwise, you get more of a perspective, right? Having said this, Matej, your experience on the way assessment has changed in that part of the world, if I may say so. Yeah.
Well, in this part of the world, that's difficult because, as you said, a big player in all of this are universities. And so we as you know, institutions of learning serve two roles. The first role is to actually guide learning. And if you look at the sort of innovation out there, again, one of the big accrediting agencies, New England Association of Schools and Colleges, NEAS, has assessment as one of their key pillars in their new ACE protocol. And I encourage all of you to take a look at that because they very powerfully capture this in three words. They talk about assessment as, of, and for learning. And those are the three things that assessment really should do. Assessment should be a learning event in itself. It should assess learning, but it should also guide future learning. And so moving from your traditional, multiple choice quiz to something that forces you to actually go through an act of exploration, forces you to actively show the ability to transfer knowledge, that's a huge step for all educators. And again, the COVID pandemic has demonstrated it very powerfully, because once you have to do assessment at a distance, and the student may have friends, parents, and Google in the room, forms of assessment that just test academic knowledge, content knowledge, become meaningless because it's very easy, frankly, to cheat on. And ultimately, it also tests the wrong thing. It tests the ability of our students to beat Google at finding information, which in the long run is definitely a foregone and lost race. So shifting towards form of assessment that require transfer of knowledge and novel application of knowledge is critical. But of course, there's the second element, which is we also need to prepare students to operate in the society and an environment that waits for them. And that's where the more traditional forms of assessment come back with a vengeance. And I'll talk a little bit in the final part about what we could try and do about that. But obviously, we still have to do the state leaving examinations. We still have to take, the AP exams, the IB exams, the A levels, the standardized SAT exams, and all of that stuff that's required by universities as well. And that's, that's an inevitable fight that we all have to fight, and you have to fight in India as well.
I think you did sum it up well. In fact, John, over to you. And how are things in Singapore?
Okay, I'm speaking from my very limited context. We're a very unusual school. Tanglin Trust School is completely independent. We're not part of a school group. We're not part of the Singapore education system. We call ourselves a British international school, but we are not bound by what they do in the UK. So, but having said that, we do follow the A-levels and IB, and they are constraining at the top end of the school. I think we have been offering the IB diploma for about 15 years. And when we first adopted that, moving from just purely A-levels, it made a huge shift at the top of the school, because there are elements to the IB. There's the CAS element, the extended essay. We've made changes to our A-level program. So all the A-level students now do an extended project qualification, compulsory. And they all follow CAS alongside the IB students. So we're doing what we can within the constraints of the system to reflect our values and promote that broader education and the skills. But as I said, I think it's doing what you can within the system. Much more exciting is below the age of, so from 14 down, from age 3 to 14. We have complete control. So that's where we're putting a lot of effort at the moment. And I think, again, the pandemic changes have kind of accelerated that. We have the freedom. I talked about the spreadsheets sort of going away. Of course, we still keep some. But I think having these learning platforms, and we use Seesaw in the lower part of the school, Google Classroom in the junior school, and Microsoft Teams and OneNote in the high school. And all of those tools allow students to build up portfolios of work just without any effort. I think Gaurav, in the last panel we were on together, mentioned this. In the old days, building a portfolio was a real troublesome process. You had to collate things, put them in files, remember where you'd put them in order. With all these online tools, there's no effort. You do the work in the classroom and it's automatically there. And the other thing is I mean, there's a sort of buzzword around visible learning, but one of the aspects of that is the teacher marks more and more online, and that marking is instantly visible to the parent as well as the student. So that, and this is not a mark necessarily. It's a comment, a guidance, hint for improving the work, which is much more powerful. And I think because that exists and it's there as a record, then you don't have so much need for the spreadsheet with those meaningless transient marks, and you can focus on, what we're bringing in is less, maybe twice a year. We do a more formal assessment and record those marks. And maybe we only report a grade to parents. We're moving to doing that once a year only, right across the school, because we want to take the focus away from that ranking of students and onto the learning.
Interesting. In fact, we'll come to that as well. And I think Mrs. Mathur is left. Mrs. Mathur? Yeah.
Thank you, Gaurav. So you're aware that my school is part of the DPSGS group of schools. So to set the context of then and now, over the last decade, we have developed an ERD, or Educational Research and Developmental Team. So we've been working with a skill and competency-based curriculum, and we've emphasized on students getting their own goals. They should set their own goals in order to raise their intrinsic motivation. So we've worked with designing curriculum based on the 6 C's of education, communication, creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, citizenship, character. So we've been doing that. And we successfully experimented with blended learning via flipped classrooms, etc. But the last year's lockdown just threw us into a new world of complete online learning. So due to this new normal, we had to shift our approach. So now learning had to be redefined. So we didn't take a summer break, but instead we immersed ourselves into developing a completely new curriculum design, which we very fondly call CD 2020 in honor of the fact that 2020 made us review and redesign because incorporating change is actually the only constant. So this design broke up the curriculum into scholastic and foundational domains. So fine and performing arts, sports, citizenship, compulsory membership of clubs and societies, community outreach being as important, if not more than scholastics. So they were not relegated or denigrated to the lesser role of being termed as co-curricular or extracurricular. They got embedded in the curriculum. So having done this, we brought out a manual and was crafted and created by the professional learning communities or the PLCs in all our 8 schools. And now it's, in the possession of each and every individual of the school. So we've modified our lesson plans to make each session student-led and inquiry-based. So we've created units of inquiry and we cater to an appetizer or bridge session to understand the students' pre-knowledge. There are mid-UI reviews. There are teacher and student reflections leading to personalized learning pathways. And then we do have formative assessments. Periodic summative assessments are held. We'll talk about that a little later. But the formative is given a large weightage. So assessments are not those big events for the calendar. They are embedded in for learning to take place. So I'm happy to share that the results are encouraging and gratifying. There's lots more to be done, but we are on the job. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. So before we go to the last part, I will quickly go to Dr. Bali. I've been able to change your name, display with number 1.
Thank you.
Number two, I was to all the leaders of ours, we will open up the panel after the last question, which we are done with. However, one is that Dr. Prem, I would like to get your perspective as to how it is beyond the spreadsheet, if I may say, the assessment bit which John outlined, one thing. Second is I come to Dr. Bali on her bit as well as to what are the visible changes she has been implementing as a leader in the past 18 months or so on the assessment bit. But before that, I come to Dr. Prem that if there's a rebuttal to what John said, what will it be for? Yeah.
Is it Dr. Prem first?
Mr. Gaurav?
Yeah, I said Dr. Prem first, please. Dr. Prem?
Yeah, Mr. Gaurav, can you please repeat the question? I got disconnected.
No, what I said was just to, I'm happy that you didn't hear that bit. So having said this, I'll just say that one is that the spreadsheet bit, which I think you did, what is the assessment as per the technological progress we are talking about beyond the spreadsheet? Right. That's what my question was. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the future of assessments, Gaurav and everyone, I think that is also taking through a great sea change. One is, of course, a competency-based education model, which actually helps you to link the various competencies. And the new education policy, by the way, also talks about outcome-based education or competency-based education. For example, our platform, which is Brightspace platform, has an inbuilt competency-based education model. And what it does is that the competencies can be linked to the content, number one, and the competencies can also be linked to the assessments. As a student goes through the learning ecosystem and he attains various competencies from level 0 to level 10, all those competencies can be tracked using technology. It helps the institution, the faculties, as also the parents and students to actually see how they are graduating, how they are performing on the development of those competencies. This is number one. Number two, a very important and significant feature which these platforms they bring to the platform is gamification tools. Now, using gamifications in today, as you know, all these students were born in either late 90s or early 2000s. They were born amidst technology and the games that they play on mobiles and the computers. All talk about speeds, all talk about different levels. Now, gamification tool helps the institution to graduate to another level. So if you have qualified level 1, you automatically get to the assessment of the level 2, level 3, level 4, and level 5. And students love this because they're used to using gamification tools and they love graduating to the next level. So you can link gamification tools to the assessment, making it very, very exciting for the learners to use the technology to actually learn, unlearn, and then learn. So gamification tools, competency-based education, linking competencies to assessments are the two major ways all the institutions and schools are going to see, which will absolutely do away with the Excel sheets, maintaining grades, because grading automatically happens on the platform. You don't have to do anything, any calculations, anything. Automatically, the grades are available. Grades can link tools like gamification, tools like competency-based education, tools like video assignments, variety of quizzes. Everything can be graded automatically, and this absolutely does away with the mundane tasks of preparing those large, lengthy Excel sheets, which have no use going forward. So that's what I foresee as the future.
And I'm presuming that this is stupid people friendly like me. I mean, you can easily use this, no problem, in terms of having very technology progress. Okay, fair enough.
Absolutely. Okay. Few hours of training and that's it.
Okay. Fair. Dr. Bali, over to you.
Yeah. I'm just going to talk very briefly about a few things that we've experimented with grades 9 to 12. We can't experiment too much because at the end of the day, the children have to write their IGCSE examination, which Cambridge made sure they did, and they've done well. For the IB, of course, set parameters. So, we couldn't have tampered much. In any case, there is a lot of learning is inherent in IB and a lot of activity in terms of CAS and research is embedded in IB. But with the grades nursery to 8, we definitely can, we have a lot of leeway to experiment. So I'm going to repeat what the gentleman just mentioned about gaming. In fact, we've tried this in one of the classrooms and we've called it gaming the future. Now, when I say gaming the future, because children are very, they're very friendly with technology, they are digital natives. And so what we have tried to do is, we've tried to assess them by matching a work task or integrating the work task in a game and allowed the children to play those games to assess their levels. So the work tasks have been very carefully embedded in the games and it has been given to all across the board. We've tried it in one classroom and it seems to have worked well. Of course, we have to fine tune it. So we are calling it gaming the future right now. That's one. The second thing that I implemented was what I've called UEDT. When I say UEDT, it means unit and diagnostic testing. Now, what is happening was children, when they're home, somehow their learning and assimilation is not as strong as when you're actually in the classroom, face to face with the teacher. So I told my middle school teachers, rather than giving them a whole quantum of work and asking them to sit for an exam, for a 3-hour exam, which just doesn't make sense to me, I'd rather that you give them a unit and diagnostic test and ascertain, have they really assimilated what they needed to learn in that particular unit. So I think that's worked very well because one, Gaurav, already the children are buckling under emotional pressure and the lack of communication with teachers and peers. And I think it's very unfair to test them under such times. The times are testing, so let's not test them, please, for heaven's sake.
Well said, well said.
So we've introduced the UEDT and I think it's gone down very well. So they're doing a whole set of tasks. And then for me, it's consistent learning because every single week you have 2 and 3 and 4 UEDTs. And they're fine with it because you only have to study a little bit. And we figured out if they've assimilated or not. So I think it seems to be working well. And then there are other things called some back-to-back brains, which you're using with primary. So in back-to-back brains, you give them a problem and then ask them to write the answers and then kind of, discuss with one another to figure out, answers to a unique problem and have different perspectives and a teacher's monitoring it. So multiple such things I think we have experimented with in the classroom, but I'm trying to weed out a semester exam. If I had my way, I'd weed out the semester exam, at least while they're learning online. Thank you.
Oh, well said. I think these are testing times. I mean, how much of a test do you need more to be given for that matter? But thank you very much, Dr. Bali. As I said, we've almost come to the last part of this panel, which is that I will not just open up the house for the last question, which is actually, as an educator, obviously I'll begin with my panel to comment on that, which is, where do you see, and I will request to keep that into pointers, which is, where is the future of assessment headed in terms of more or less you have already answered, if I may say. Dr. Bali especially did say that I think she's moved to a unit sort of a pattern, but having said this, will that be the way forward always? I'm not really sure of, right? Because I'm sure the way things will evolve or things will change, maybe there will be a set of improvisation which your system or you would like to bring in for that matter. So
Definitely later, as we move on, we'll know.
absolutely, absolutely. So I am opening up the house for quick Q&A as well, which is that anyone from the panel and beyond, if they want to ask our esteemed panel any specific question, or if you want to have any observation. While you make an observation, my request is to keep it, please, brief for that matter, so that it is to the point. And if your question is, please address it to any one of the panel which you would like your answer from, or the entire panel. How we will do it is, we will, if you can have a quick virtual show of hands, something like this, we'll ask you to unmute and then ask your question or make an observation. Over to, Vijay Lakshmi Kumar. Please, ma'am, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm principal of Asian International School, Howrah. And this is basically an observation because with the change in the question paper this year, though the exams were not held, quote unquote, so we have seen that, even the MCQs are also based on creative and critical thinking. So I think that is where, as a nation, we are moving towards the change in the pattern of discussion. Do not judge the rote learning in a child, but the creative and critical thinking. So this is just an observation I wanted to share. Thank you.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly mute everybody, disallowing participants to unmute. And now I will help you unmute so that we can do this. Okay. Vijay Lakshmi, we have already taken up your observation. Thank you for bringing that to the conversation. Nitesh Rathore. You'll have to unmute, Nitesh ji.
Good morning, everyone. This is Principal from Arya Gurukul Ambernath branch that is in Kalyan. I like the way Mr. Poddar, Raghav Poddar has given, and there was a question in between. What is the ultimate goal of education? So there were so many things came and I was unfortunately unable to unmute and tell by that time. But I feel that the ultimate goal of education has to be transformation. Education doesn't mean only educating right from class nursery, LKG, UKG to 12 or college. It is even educating people, those who are already in the field. See, these pandemics have hit us so badly, and we teachers, the community of teachers, have adapted the things so quickly and nicely. Is it not education? So what we have done, we have transformed ourselves. So the ultimate goal of education has to be transformation. It is not just curiosity, or I'm sorry, I'm just using those keywords being framed by that time. But this is my feeling that education is throughout the life and it has to be for transformation. What I am today, if I'm transforming to a better one, that is my education. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nitesh ji. Nilesh ji, in fact, sorry, I was mispronouncing your name. But having said this, since I see no show of hand, so I am more or less starting to thank my panel, who was absolutely fabulous, completely out of time as well. But before I leave, I would reiterate that question of mine, that where do you see, and I would look forward to have pointed questions, which is answers. In fact, Miraji, as per you, where is the future of assessment headed?
So in my organization, we talk about know, be, and do. So till we don't have assessments that better reflect what the children know and what they can do with that knowledge, assessments will be meaningless. However, one person cannot do anything alone. It has to be a collective and shared understanding and wisdom across students and educators, and in fact, people in the know who are education policy makers, so that we are able to give individual learners what they really need. So we need to have strengthened educational systems overall, because an individual school's vision is not possible. You can be a change maker only in a limited way. A combined vision across educational boards and institutions of higher learning. And you know, when push comes to shove, we do it. Like we could not have the 12th standard examinations, but we are working a way around it. I think uniformity and consistency, along with a shared vision across the entire country, is what we need. Thank you, Gaurav.
Wonderful. Mrs. Murthy?
Oh, so I look at it like this, Gaurav, that the future of assessment, there are two parallel tracks here. One is the system. How the system is going to change is relatively unpredictable, NEP or no NEP, okay? It's relatively unpredictable. What individual schools can do, sky is the limit, okay? While meeting the norms of the systems, you know, because there are the 10th board exams and the 12th board exams, whichever board you may be following. While meeting these boards, nobody says you can't experiment, you can't do wonders within the school. So for me, these two parallel tracks are equally important, because validation of that certificate is required for a university entrance exam. In fact, in the last few months, the debate about 12th board exam and university admission, I was just thinking, why are they making so much fuss about it? Why can't the universities just conduct the so-called 21st century skills aptitude test in children and take them into it? Because the problem here is we talk one thing and test another thing. Okay, so all these controversies need to be clarified, and we need to have the system which also advocates the same thing. But schools need not be limited by a system. While respecting it and following it, schools can have a sky as a limit in terms of assessment. For me, that's what is important.
Well said, well said. And I will quickly, obviously I have to go back to a few of my other panelists as well, but Dr. Madhav, sir, if you're there, okay, yeah, I can see you. However, the name is, give me a moment.
It's an official account, Gaurav. Can't
Yes,
help.
sir, yeah. I just saw that, and in fact, then I made you the co-host. So sir, I'll take your liberty of 5 more minutes, so that I'm just winding up this panel.
Take your time. I would be very happy with lesser time.
No. We'll give you your full time, sure. But having said this, I'll just come back to you. John, quick bit on your side. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, it's those two names. Let's call it assessment for learning in the schools, and then university entrance. And I think if we're looking long term in the future, we need that university entrance to be more balanced. I think we already know how to do this. There are examinations out there that have a blended assessment approach. So there's coursework, there's project-based assessed work. So we know how to do that stuff. These schools can't do that. We need governments to get behind that. But in the meantime, schools can work on their assessment for learning. So I agree with Sita's comment. Regardless of what we have to do for the endpoint, we can make changes along the way, and we have to trust that those won't affect our results, and might even make the results better if we do it well.
Matej? Yeah.
Thank you. I will leave you with one last sort of international effort to look at. It's called the mastery transcript, as in the idea of mastering something. And this idea is based on the realization that our current grades don't really say much about our students. If you look at it, a bunch of your school transcripts and you see a number of straight A students, what do we actually learn about them? And even students who have a couple of B's in history or math, what does this tell us about the skills and competencies of those students? So the mastery transcript seeks to completely redesign it by getting rid of classical grades in classical classes, and instead take a look at measuring student competencies, allowing students to build portfolios and become curators of their learning and presenting it meaningfully to universities. And I think that's where the future is. Funnily enough, the Yale University Law School, one of the top law schools in the United States,
Matej, we lost, I think, Matej, we lost you.
Yes, sir, there is some network issue.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. You were saying the last which we could hear was Yale. That's it.
Oh, I was just saying the Yale Law School, the place where a number of Supreme Court judges come from, doesn't give grades to its students. They want students to engage in sort of deep thinking, and they say, we think grades are meaningless for them. It's one of the most, highly regarded universities in the world. But of course, when they select students, they look at grades. So that shift has to come from universities, has to allow it. And that's what the Mastery Transcript Consortium, a group of high schools and universities, is trying to achieve. So I encourage you to take a look at that if you want to see where hopefully assessment is headed and how universities can help that. And with that, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you all. Have a great day and a great conference.
Likewise. Thank you, Matej. Thank you for bringing that perspective. And panel, we have a couple of questions or observation. We will just quickly take them up, and then we'll say thank you to you. Dr. Sunanda, you have an observation, and Anand, Krishna, that's what I could read only. Yeah. Anand, you'll have to unmute yourself, please. Yeah.
Yeah, just did that. So my name is Anand Krishnaswamy, and I have been leading the academics at a school at the outskirts of Dehradun, and I've also been in the edtech industry, and my background's in computer science. So with that context, what I would like to do, and this is something that we've been challenging teachers in our school. The thing is that we can't do it officially because we're governed by the CBSE rules, etc. Is that the entire scope of assessment feels a little odd, because we of course say one thing, and all schools on record on a conference, on a meeting like this, will say one thing, but they will always toe the line of what the market wants. There hasn't been a single school out there which has come out and said, we will never ever publish our assessment. We will never ever get our students to sit for a board exam, right? Because we will assess our students, we will provide them what. So one thing to do, and I really wish it goes down that road, is to flip assessment around and make it an assessment of teachers. So if I, as a teacher, can give the right set of comments for the performance of a student and help that student get better and better, I get a particular grade in having moved that student from point A to point B, right? And the more students I have worked with, the universities can perform their own assessment on such students. Or they might say, you know what, if you've been a student of Anand Krishnaswamy, and this is the reputation this person has had, we are willing to gamble with you. Whereas we don't have that onus on teachers anymore, right? Of course, based on the Gurukul system that we've all come to believe, as depicted by Ramanand Sagar and all that stuff, because really none of us even know what the Gurukul system was, right? We really like to fancy that this is what it was, and all largely based on what we saw on DD Network, right? In there, you always sent a student to a particular guru. It was the guru's reputation and the ability to have shown and demonstrated transformation, which is why you send the student there. So why is it that schools will not take that up and say that let's assess ourselves in how have we been able to provide feedback to the students and get them to move from point A to point B? And in doing that, let's assess ourselves as to how good have we been. And that's it. We don't publish scores of students anymore. And universities, if you want to take them, go ahead, do your assessment, or you can just rely on the reputation of the teacher in the school. And that's about it.
Thanks, Anand. Thanks for your perspective. I think, Sunanda ji, quickly.
Yes, yes. Gaurav, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, you invited me well, but I got disconnected, some network issue.
No problem.
First of all, big thank you to all the panelists and for sure the whole team of IPN. On this particular wonderful platform which has been provided by Gaurav and team, I really want to just not to know anything, just want to convey a message, because last 15 days I was occupied with some of the medical associations, some of the doctors' sessions, where they requested that, Sunanda ma'am, if you can convey this message to all the educationists who are doing so well, I would like to request you all one question or maybe a request from my side. Let's find some synonym of the word assessment, evaluation. like Sita Murthy beautifully said, she gave a simple question, what you know, and just that gave her the tremendous outcome. So please, all of you educationists, find a synonym of evaluation and assessment. And second very important thing is, maybe the third wave would come or not, as doctors are very much occupied with arranging things, private and government doctors, I could meet all in that session. They are saying, please make your children emotionally strong to face not only assessment, not only evaluation of schools or universities, but make them ready to face any kind of challenges. So I, being associated with mental well-being and some of the courses, as Gaurav knows, with the happiness curriculum, for sure, very much as a writer and as an expert, but I request you all to please let's take the sessions like this together to give schools the best so that our every child is ready for the future. So please, let's find a synonym of assessment evaluation. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Completely out of time. Thank you very much. Thank you, panel. Thank you. In fact, as I said, my job was always more or less complete when you have a wonderful panel, which I could be with, in fact, right? Meera Mathurji, Dr. Bali, Matez, John, and Ms. Murthy, and finally, Dr. Maheshwari. Thank you very much, each one of you, for making this session worthwhile for all of us. And this is just the beginning of the dialogue. As I said, we have one more full day after this. Please stick around. And if you have questions from any of the panels, if I may say, leaders are still around with us. You can ask your question then and there as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you very much. But can I just say what Anand Krishna proposed? This is like a Bermuda Triangle between philosophy, practice, and process. Which part of the angle gets pulled more depends on the context that you are in. Okay, when you're in a system, you have to meet a system, but your philosophy is something that can drive you to do better things. Like how already somebody shared that Yale University does not give any grading. I think there are many universities and schools in India that need to grow to that level yet. We have ISB in Hyderabad where they don't give any certificate, but people get recruited. Things do happen, but I think philosophy is something that drives us more. That's all I just wanted to add.
Well said, absolutely. And thank you, panel. Thank you very much. You were wonderful, and it was a pleasure listening to each one of you. And I will quickly, in fact, introduce our next speaker, because I've been keeping him waited for almost 15 because we had the initial session lined up, which was a little late. But having said this, Dr. Madhav Dev Saraswat needs no introduction, a very, very distinguished school leader of our country, who is at present heading the Sindhya Boys School in Gwalior, Madhya Pradesh. And I request Dr. Madhav for his special address to the gathering. Over to you, Dr. Madhav.
Thank you, Gaurav. Good afternoon, all the fellow educators. I'm not sure whether it's a special address, but I wish to thank Gaurav for keeping me out of all the technical discussions, because I am master of none. I actually don't understand several things. I'm still learning. Nevertheless, I would like to quote our first speaker, Raghav Poddar. Raghav used the word refresh, and I would like to add with refresh, revisit, and I'm going to talk about revisiting. And Dr. Sunanda Grover was asking for synonym for the assessment. The purpose of education, when it must have started, and we don't know when and how, as Mr. Krishna Swami said. I think assessment means help the child to understand herself. And if we put it in Sanskrit, the most appropriate substitute for assessment would be Atmanam Vidhi. Know thyself. Apne aap ko jano. And the minute we change the focus of assessment and we start helping the child to know himself or herself, perhaps, several things will fall in place. That is with my, limited experience. Coming back to IPN and Gaurav, thank you very much for this opportunity. And to start with, I would like to draw our attention to a prayer. And this prayer has been taken from Rig Veda, and I'm sure that all of us know that Rig Veda is supposedly the oldest scripture of the world. The purpose of invoking this prayer is to suggest the relevance of certain basic universal principles. Whether it is a good time, smoothly flowing time, or like ours, which we term as VUCA. I just heard this a few days ago. VUCA, which is short for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. In my opinion, more so in such times, there is a need to reinforce this prayer. And that's why I am taking the liberty. And this, at least for ourselves as teachers or caretakers, I would say, or not even caretakers, there is a beautiful word in English which is nurturer, as nurturers. So whether I'm a teacher or a mother or a father or a peon, if I am in the role of a nurturer, then this prayer has a lot of relevance for us. And I'm also taking the liberty of reading the entire prayer, not only the first stanza, which I am sure that all of us would know. And this is how this prayer starts. I will also translate in English. Sangachadvam sambadadvam sambhu mananse janatam deva bhagam yatha purve sanjanana upasate. May we move in harmony, speak in one voice, let our minds be in agreement, just as the ancient gods shared their portion of sacrifice. Samano mantra samiti samani, samanam manah sahchittamesham, samanam mantram avimantra eva, Samanena vo havisha juhumi. May our purpose and voice be the same. May we all be of one mind. In order for such unity to form, I offer a common prayer. Samani vah akuti, samana hridayani vah, samanam vastavo mano yatha vah suswahasati. May our intentions, and this is the most important stanza actually of this prayer, may our intentions and our aspirations be like, so that a common objective unifies us all. And I think, Gaurav, through IPN, this is what you have been doing. You have brought us together for such a novel cause. So well done, Gaurav. Thank you very much. With this, I would like to submit that, we can use this time, this period of uncertainty, unpredictability, to revisit the purpose of education. I don't think that the world has ever talked so much about the education and health as much we have talked in the last 15 months. And what I have understood through my mentors is that the meaning of holistic education, and this holistic starts with W, not with H. Development means helping the child to grow in 5 areas: cerebral, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual, and prime the child for self-learning, Atmanam Vidhi, so that the child can actualize her innate and dynamic potential. And these two words are very important, innate and dynamic. In addition to this, there are two distinct purposes of education. Education for life and education for livelihood. Principles and learning outcomes for the purpose of life are more or less universal, like good character, being humane, kind, hardworking, courageous. On the other hand, education for livelihood is changeable, more so in today's time. And as teachers and parents, we need to focus on both these objectives. It should not happen that in managing one, the second one gets ignored. There has to be a fine balance between these two, because people also don't like people, those who are good for nothing. You are good, so what? So one has to be good for the world and good for himself and herself as well. And in my limited understanding of the world, I'm daring to say that in the last century, our focus got tilted more towards the education for livelihood and the person we have been talking about got overlooked, and I would say to the extent of disregard. And many of our today's problems can directly be connected to this point because the person got overlooked. On the other hand, there has been, so that is one situation, and another situation is that there has been exponential growth in the body of knowledge, which has overwhelmed the entire humanity. And excitement of chasing this new knowledge took the entire community away from the real human world. And understandably, schools and now the media as well, helping all of us, have played an important role in this. Perhaps that's the reason that our children are tuned to be more excited to learn about artificial intelligence than to avail an opportunity to enjoy the wonders of nature. And in other words, when I say wonders of nature, intelligence, inherent cumulative intelligence of billions of years. And this is just an example. We have come a long way as a humanity, and we have evolved and progressed a lot. And there is no going back. So there is no room, no scope for gyan कि हम पहले इतने अच्छे थे, हम इतना अच्छा करते थे. Why can't we go back to the roots? No, we have evolved and we have to accept this change. And as teachers, the demands on us have changed, and they have not only changed, they have also multiplied. And we have to equip ourselves to prepare our children for the unpredictable tomorrow. And when I was, writing the sentence, I was just thinking to myself that will it be a good idea? Will it be a good idea to start teaching our kids, even parenting, during classes, so that they don't commit those blunders which most of us have committed as parents or teachers? Is there a need? That was just a question I am sharing it with you. So my humble submission is that let's not focus only on the immediate challenges, but also let's use this opportunity to go beyond with the focus on the person who is endowed with innate and dynamic attributes. Fortunately, because of the science, progress in science, understanding of the brain, we are better equipped today to deal with these challenges as we know our child better and the requirements as well. The only need is that we have to strike the balance between the education for life and education for livelihood. While we focus on skills sets to be successful in the real world, we also need to keep in mind the following. Children have to be physically, emotionally, and mentally strong if we want them to do well in their life, not only academically, not only professionally. We should take them closer to the real world. Let them feel and smell the world, the real world. Let them know more through their 5 instincts. There is a need to push them out of their comfort zone. We should cater challenges to our children so that they better their own limits. And these limits are actually perceived limits because we usually don't realize that there is more in us than we know. Hence, these challenges will help us to optimize our innate qualities and will also make us more resilient. And tomorrow's world would be the word for resilience. We should inspire our kids to be strong, not fragile. They have to be better prepared physically, emotionally, and mentally to face the real world. And for that, we would have to let our overprotective instincts go. Because this is what I have realized as a father and as a teacher, that we have become, because we see so much of negativity around us that we wish to protect our kids from that. And in return, we become overprotective. And the minute we become overprotective, we don't allow them to prepare themselves to face the negativity. When we will not be there tomorrow, these children would have to face the world on their own. So if there is any possibility, let's not be over or very protective. I'm also of the opinion, and that's again as an educator and as a teacher, that short-term stress is good for kids because that will teach them how to handle problems and face defeat. And it can be done during the classes. While we talk about the overall personality development, most of the time we talk about sports and co-curricular activities. But in my humble opinion, there are two more very important components, and we should try to incorporate these two components in our learning teaching process. And even if we are a day school or a small school, all this is possible. And these two important components are service and adventure. Because unless we expose them to these two, I think we will not be able to help them to realize their potential fully. So these two, in my personal opinion, because I have been a part of service venture endeavors through the students, and I have been part of adventure, and I know it for sure. I know it for sure that it's not only children, it has changed my life as well. It has changed me altogether. And it is an important part. Other than that, I am sure that most of the schools do that, but I'm just re-emphasizing that creative visualization, art, music, and more importantly, meditation. Time for self-introspection should be catered for, because unless we take a pause, if we are not taking a pause, then refreshing and revisiting will not be complete. So if we really wish to revisit, if we really wish to refresh ourselves, then we have to take a moment off. And during that moment, there has to be a component of self-introspection. Another thing which is purely, through my limited experience, is that once again, we have to groom our kids somehow, in some manner, to take their own responsibility. they need to know from day one that they are responsible for themselves. And it cannot continue that first mother takes the responsibility, then father, then teachers, then the organization, then communities takes their responsibility. This self-accountability, own responsibility should be, I don't know how it is possible. It should be part of our curriculum. We have to look into their habits and behaviors. So this is what I wanted to share as a teacher, as a fellow educator, nothing technical. And I also know it for sure that it is easy to say these things, very difficult to incorporate, because you have to walk the talk. Each one of us needs to be an example, because what I have learned, another word, the way I have learned an English word called nurture, I have also learned another word in English which is called imbibe. Children imbibe. And that's the real learning, what you imbibe. So all of us need to be very careful of our conduct and how these growing children are looking at us, seeing us, or perceiving us. And we have to be very, very careful about that. So we have to learn to walk the talk. And with this, I would like to conclude with another couplet in Sanskrit. There is no need for anxiety. And this is what this couplet says. Shanahi pantha, shanahi kantha, shanahi parvat langanam, shanahi vidya, shanahi vittam, panch etan shanai shanai. There are 5 things which would need gradual and steady perseverance. So let's move gradually and steadily on our paths to overcome all the challenges now we are aware of, help ourselves first and help our children to be ready for the changing world. Thank you very much for this time.
Thank you, sir. Then, and usually I call you the person who brings the calming effect to the entire conversation. So that was a job of a yogi, if I may say. Thank you very much. Wonderful. In fact, there is someone who is having a show of hand. Please, ma'am, you want to say something? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Happy afternoon. Before we end, I appreciate sir's talk to us. Definitely a calming effect. It really put a new perspective. A small request, sir, if you could just enlighten us with 1 or 2 examples, how we can, because that's very important what you said, that children should be trained to be accountable, to be responsible. We do a lot of things, but if we could, you could share what you do at your school, a few examples. Because implementation is not so easy.
That's right. That's right. So some time ago, I visited a school in Germany, and they took us to a kindergarten school, and it was their lunch time. And these small kids, they must have been 3 or 4-year-old kids. They opened their tiffins, had their lunch, and after that, they cleaned their table, put everything in place. And this is where, I realized that if you really wish your kids to be accountable, then it has to start the day they start walking. We should not be waiting for them to be able to comprehend linguistically our instructions, but it should become part and parcel of their being. So in a classroom, before the person who cleans, I'm substituting a word for a help. I'm saying the person who helps us to clean our classrooms. Will it be possible for us, no matter how young these kids are, to ask the kids to pick up the papers, pencils, pen, put everything in the dustbin, put table and desk the way they got it when they entered the classroom. That is it, just 5 minutes. To start with, I am saying, and if that becomes a practice, I'm sure gradually they will understand that they have to take care of the school. Am I able to respond?
Thank you, sir. It is very true for a younger age group. But once they attain their teens and all, these things become a little difficult. And in the pandemic now, if, in the pandemic, it's very difficult for us to emphasize that, because only getting them up from their bed and sitting in front of the computer is a task which the parents are facing trouble now. They are asking us, how do we make the children accountable for what they are doing? So,
जब मैं छोटा था तो मेरे पिताजी एक शेर का सिर्फ एक ही लाइन सुनाते थे, मुझे वही याद है, तो मैं आपको सुना देता हूँ। आपके पीछे चलेंगी आपकी नेकियां और रुसवाइयां. So the mistakes which we have committed as parents, now we have to pay back.
Yes.
So when we were giving the food on the bed while he was watching TV, कि बेटा कुछ खा ले, this is what we were, preparing him for.
They're paying the price. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Nisha Bhakur. Nisha, you'll have to unmute. Yeah, Nisha. Hello.
Audible, Gaurav?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Nisha
It
ji.
is always such a pleasure to hear, sir. And I have no question, but just to say that I have been, hearing so many webinars in the last 18, 19 months. And I think sir has just nailed it so right. I think if we could just work on what he said, this is the answer to the, to the future of education. And I miss so much working with you, sir. And I really hope I get a chance again. I really miss. Thank you so much, Gaurav, for this. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm feeling so emotional.
I'll give you sir's number.
Oh, I have sir's number. I've been in working under sir, and sir was my son's principal as well in Jaipur.
Okay.
And I'm hoping I get to work with sir once again.
Lovely. This is always a pleasure to having you. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Sushila ji. Yeah, Sushila ji, you'll have to unmute.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. I just want to add on and probably a little bit different opinion what sir has also said. Different in the sense, not the opinion different, but the environment. I think the children are, of course, much more accountable and responsible when it comes to the boarding schools. Because I'm a boarding student myself during my school days. I've studied in MGT and my son is in RIMC. So there I've seen also again the children are made absolutely responsible from class 1 itself. They call it class 1 when they enter the school in the class 8. To the extent that they are left free to go out to the market and told to come back sharp at 5 o'clock, and they come back. They don't even have the fear that the children will be running away. So, sir, I would again request if you could differentiate a bit of your, you throw more light on the day school concept rather, keeping the boarding schools on aside. Because boarding school children are certainly more responsible and more accountable compared to the day school students.
Ma'am, only thing I would like to say here is that one, that is an assumption. Two is that forced discipline is no discipline. So if you are behaving in a certain manner, in a certain setup, that is not you. So who are you when you are not being observed, when you exactly know that nobody is looking at you? So I'm giving you another example, ma'am, and I'm sorry, for giving these examples. So I've been fortunate to travel with a lot of fellow educators. So this time we were visiting some universities, and as soon as we got off the plane, we arrived at the hotel. We were given our rooms, and one of the fellow principal came and said that I am going to fill my bathtub with the hot water, and I will spend time there. And I don't know how come, but I remembered that just a week prior to that, they had celebrated or they had organized an activity on save water, save the water. So I asked her, okay, ma'am, last week though you were talking about save the water, save the globe, save the earth. And now you are wasting so much of time, so much of water. So she said that we are not in our country. But I said this natural resource is global. This is for the, and more than that, it's a mindset. Am I able to respond to your question, ma'am?
Yes, sir, more or less. I mean, I believe the same guidelines that you are saying, but then, and I've also worked with a boarding school along with, now I'm working in a day school. So I also have mixed experiences. So I thought maybe, I mean, I can gather something more from you. So
If
I think
we remove drama from whatever we do in our schools,
absolutely,
I think receiving will increase at least by 80%. My principles cannot be different for India and for any other country. I cannot be a different man at home and different person uh, in this school. So I was once I was telling my daughter that today I received a very good comment from one of my fellow colleagues, and she said that with sir you cannot play a gender card. And I was actually elated. And I came back and I shared this with my daughter, Koshki, this is what, I was told. So she said, Papa, I don't know why you are so happy. So I said, this is what I've heard. And look at me. I'm, being celebrated as an ideal man. And she said that, but you are a man. So I said, what should I do? Then she said, the day you will start looking at your teachers as people, as person, not male, female, then such statements will not make any effect to you. And this is where you have to reach. So ma'am, a lot of internalization and a lot of learning from each other needs to be done. And why I'm sharing this particular example is that at times we think that our assessment of the situation is correct, but we also need to see that how people are receiving it. So while a teacher received it positively, my daughter received it in a different manner, altogether in a different manner. And she said, you still need to work on yourself.
Robert, your question or an observation?
Yes, I would just like to say that I think two people ago mentioned about how wonderful the things that you were saying, and they knew you. But I just like to say, I don't know you, but I still recognize that. It still really shines through. And I really recommend to everybody at the end of today or tomorrow or in a week's time to go back and to look at the recording of what you've said, because it's so simple that some people might say, oh, yes, that's easy. Or we do that. But they don't. And they have to look at the depth of the simple things that you're saying. I think you really hit a lot of nails on a lot of their heads. I'd like to just add, though, perhaps a little piece of a tactic or a strategy or an approach that I used in a day school. And that was one was about homework or home assignments, and the other one was about assessments. And the first one, I got my kids together, they were complaining about home assignments, and I said, okay, so I will give you the home assignments I normally give in my course. I'm a science teacher. And if you can come up with a better assignment than the one I give you, then I'll have a look at it and I'll say, yes, you can do that instead of the one I give you, okay? So they then put it into their own context and relate it to themselves and are researching things that are wonderful. And the second one was, I'm not going to assess you until you ask me to. And I think it was the pinnacle of my career. You know, I had kids going off to all sorts of universities and things like that, but pinnacle of my career when kids said to me, Mr. Thorne, please, we want to know how well we've been doing in this, or how well we've developed in this course. How can we understand that? And then we sit down and we talk about how to assess ourselves. And in that, you're involving them. So to develop responsibility, you need to involve the kids in the things that you usually are thinking about. Yeah.
Very true.
Well said, Robert. Yasir Rana? Yasir Rana?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Ji, Yasir ji, boliye.
Ji, I have a problem with the internet and cannot
No
open
problem.
up.
Boliye, please.
Okay. I am recently joined as a visiting faculty at GIFT University in Pakistan.
Okay.
So I'm dealing the bachelor students of BS Clinical Psychology. As previously, I have more than 10 to 12 years experience as a school teacher, principal, and coordinator, and so on. I was a trainer.
Ji.
I was a trainer with pedagogical skills and science teaching skills also. So here is a problem. The student between ages of 18 to 21 years old. I'm dealing the BS clinical psychology student, and how can I motivate regarding the subject of education? I'm dealing introduction to education, and they are not satisfied yet. I have been conducted almost 6 lectures. And today, my today's lecture is about process of education.
Okay.
So I'm trying my best, but I have so much difficulties regarding this.
Madhav sir.
Everything will be based on assumption, Mr. Rana. And I don't know whether, what I'm going to say. Background and relevance of what we want our kids to learn is very important. So what I did, I have been a Hindi and Sanskrit master, and most of my colleagues would know that Hindi teacher is also known, and with all love and affection, a lingo master, a lingo teacher. And Hindi and Sanskrit masters are also the last resort to be the principal of any school in India. And Hindi, because most of the kids in North India know Hindi, so there is also no motivation for them to learn as a subject, as a language, because there is no career. So what I did, and I learned it from one of my senior most teacher, And what I did that I stopped teaching them text. And that text was kept only for the last 6 months. For 1.5 years, so if I'm teaching class 9 and 10, so there is only one set of books for 2 years. So for 1.5 years, I will read and I will make them read only the stories. And as Robert said, I would also ask them to frame their own questions and answer them. So the quality of questions will tell me that whether they have understood the chapter or they have not understood the chapter. So questions would be theirs, responses will be theirs, and assessment will be theirs. So there is no assessment from the teacher. And once, they spend those good 18 months doing only the language, then teaching them literature becomes easy because they know the language. So, and after that, what is literature? Literature is data as good as data, some facts, some data extracts. So this is what I did, but for that, I used to work at least 2 hours a day. It's a different thing that in lieu of those 2 hours per day for good 16 years, I could also publish 3 books based on that content. But the only thing I used to do was hunt for good stories. If it was in Hindi, well and good for me. If not, then translate them in Hindi, put them together, get those photocopied, take it to the class, ask them. So gradually, this is how I managed to teach them Hindi, and I think I was received as a good teacher, very hard taskmaster, but my boys did well. So, Mr. Rana, the only thing I can say at this point of time, and purely as a teacher, and I'm not, casting any doubt. As a teacher, kids know that how much effort you have put in for preparing yourself for the class. Sooner or later, these kids get to know you better than you, and they start respecting you or treating you who you are. So the more you put in, the more you receive from the kids. This is what my learning has been. I'm not sure, Mr. Rana, if I'm able to answer to your question, but this is how I have lived as a teacher.
Ranaji, you'll have to
Thank you so
unmute.
much. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the nice response. But my concern was, I'm trying my best. I'm preparing for more than 4 to 5 hours to prepare my lecture, but my lectures are still online. That was a big gap because I have no body language there. I have no full-fledged classroom. Instead of, I'm trying my best, but they are still unable.
Take a survey, talk to them.
Gigi?
At times, no defense is the best defense. If it is possible to talk to the kids and ask them that how I can do better, is there any way I can connect with you or be able to help you? Take a survey, try to understand. Is it the content, is it the time, is it the style, or it is the platform which you are using? And this is how, the most of the world has been experimenting now. Knowing the gaps, that how I have not been able to reach. Because and you're right, that in the online world, the teacher is not sure of learning outcome. You are sure of input, but you are not sure of learning outcome. So there are teachers, they are using thousands of things to understand whether whatever I wanted to tell, whether it has reached to our kids or not. So my friend, I think your students are the key for that.
Thank you, Madhav sir. Thank you very much. I'm sure this helps Ranaji as well. Ranaji, you'll have to be the role model in front of your kids. And having said this, completely out of time, we in fact are 30 minutes ahead of our schedule. But having said this, we'll firstly thank Dr. Madhavdev Saraswat for his, what I call it, calming effect to the entire conversation. And after every session which he does with us, I get flooded by requests that I want to reach out to Madhavji, unka number dijiye mujhe. So having said this, but always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much. Lovely. And I will obviously request everyone who has been part of our conversation since morning. We are going to now take a quick lunch break, which is your homemade cooked lunch food, right? And we will join you back at sharp 2 o'clock, in fact, right? So we will have to catch up on that schedule. But having said this, if you want, I can stop this meeting and we can restart this. It can be one of the ways, or if you allow, we can possibly keep it parked this way and we start at 2 o'clock, right? So whichever way, we will start at 2 o'clock and we'll keep you posted with the second half of day one at IPN Voyage. Thank you very much for everyone who's been with us so far. And I'm sure Madhav sir has to say something. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Not at all, sir. Pleasure is all mine. Thank you. Take care, everybody. We join you at 2 o'clock.